Nice to meet you guys, everybody. My name is Don Sim from Madeviral. Today we're talking about the Southeast Asia market insights. I'm going to go deep into numbers, revenue potential, how much money you should be spending marketing, as well as how to not spend your money wrongly. Okay, so before I get into it, sorry, how do I, it's not working. Can I go back? It's fine. So anyway, before I get into the presentation proper, I want to talk a little bit about what I do. So I've been in the gaming industry for about 8.5 years. I used to do development, publishing, and now focusing on marketing and media. In Madeviral, our main businesses are actually influencer marketing with about 1,500 influencers in Southeast Asia, and that commands about 850 million followers. On top of that, we also have a hardcore game media in Thailand as well as in Indonesia. Sure, using both. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, great. So and in Thailand, we have one of the top 3 game medias, but specializing mostly in hardcore games. Okay, and for influencer marketing, we focus mostly on entertainment videos, live streaming videos, let's play videos, as well as social media shoutouts. And for Game Fever, we are focusing a lot on editorial content. That means news, reviews, trailers. So you guys got some new games launching in Southeast Asia, please let us know. We also do specialized game video content, as well as our new products, which is our game databases, where we focus a lot of raw data, a lot of game guides for very hardcore games like Overhit, for example, which is a next title. And also next year, we're planning to do a game show in Bangkok, where we'll be having a B2C, B2B, and esports. And these are some of the companies that we work with. I'm pretty sure you know some of them. Yeah. Okay, presentation proper. So let's talk about Southeast Asian gaming market. Again, a little disclaimer. This is just a fraction of what you really need to know before entering Southeast Asia, but I'm going to try and educate you guys about as much as I know in the shortest possible time. So in the Southeast Asia gaming market, based on the latest Newzoo report, it's about $3.3 billion. Newzoo reports are sometimes a little bit over-exaggerated, so it's probably around 2.5 billion, but for the sake of discussion, we'll be using 3.3 in this presentation. On top of that, Southeast Asia is actually the fastest growing game market with about 29.1% year-on-year growth. And so if Southeast Asia is basically $3.3 billion, how is this money distributed across the different countries? Now, this is basically a kind of distribution metric that we have collected by talking with various publishers throughout Southeast Asia across the different countries. And so Thailand is the #1 gaming market in Southeast Asia, followed by Vietnam and Indonesia. And it follows as so on. And of course, with a assumed continued growth rate, about 29.1%, the market should hit about $5.5 billion by 2022. And so if we want to analyze the different game genres across Southeast Asian countries, we've basically taken a look at 5 different countries. This is a snapshot taken on the 12th of July, which is last Friday. I'm not mentioning Vietnam in this metric simply because Vietnam's game market, 80% of the monetization actually happens outside the App Store and Google Play. That means that whatever ranks you see is actually quite inaccurate. So if you look across the metric here, you'll notice that there's actually some genres that stand out really, really strongly. So, for example, if you look at the top game genres by country, meaning the number of appearances of game genres across the top 20 ranks, you'll notice that strategy and MMORPG stands out really well. In particular, let's say, for example, Thailand, out of the top 20 grossing games, 7 of them are actually MMORPGs. And if you look across the region, meaning counting the number of game genres appearances across 5 countries, you notice that MMORPGs and Xianxia, which is basically Chinese MMORPGs, actually appear 22 times, followed by strategy games and MOBA and so on. If you look at the top 5 grossing genres, you will see a lot of red and orange because the MOBAs and the Battle Royale games tend to be generating a significant amount of revenue, much more than everybody else. And if you look at it, there'll be 6 appearances of Battle Royale and 6 appearances of MOBA, followed by MMORPG, strategy, and card battle. So the metrics is kind of different. If you look at it, in a sense, if you have a MOBA game or a Battle Royale game, you tend to make a lot more money. But if you have, say, an MMORPG or card battle game, you have a higher chance of entering the top 20. So it's kind of a different metric to consider. Moving ahead, if we were to look at the analysis of by genre and by rank, and when I say rank, I mean top grossing ranks. The top grossing Battle Royale, in this case, is Garena's Free Fire. The top mobile will be Mobile Legends Bang Bang. And of course, top strategy, Rise of Kingdoms Lost Crusade. Top MMORPG, Ragnarok M. And of course, top casino, Zynga Zynga's Poker. Okay, now, you know the ranks I've shared with you. Now, how much money do you expect to make in Southeast Asia? Now, there is no official metric for this. This is basically what I got from independent studies by talking to various publishers in the region. And so, and of course, again, it really depends on your game, and depends on the time of the year. But on average, the top places, top rank in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam should be netting you about 5 to 10 million USD per month, followed by the top 5 and top 20 and top 50. So countries like very small countries like Singapore, for example, you should be hitting about $500,000 to $1 million. Yeah, I'll let you guys take a few photos. Okay. So next part would be how not to waste your precious marketing dollar. Many of you guys, I'm sure you guys are super rich and do a lot of millions of dollars of marketing, but it's important to know how much to spend depending on the games that you have and the genre of games that you are publishing. So in this case, what I'm showing here, again, disclaimer, would be our recommendation from the game launches that we've done in Southeast Asia over the past years. And so, please consider that fact. Okay. So we estimate about 25% of that total revenue that you generate in Southeast Asia is actually reinvested into marketing. So if we base it on Newzoo stats of $3.3 billion, that's about $800 million. And most of the time, publishers spend it pretty wildly. So the two main questions that we receive from our clients and our partners is this: how much should I spend in the first month of marketing for my game launch? And secondly, how should I distribute my budget? Because, am I spending too much in Thailand? Should I spend more in Indonesia? And most companies actually target region-wide. So they don't exactly just target a single country, and that makes it kind of complicated to decide. Okay, the short answer, it really depends. The long answer comes in 4 parts, so I'm going to go into it. Firstly, I believe that you should be categorizing your game into 2 different metrics. The first, what is the genre of the game? If the genre of the game is not a money-making genre for the Southeast Asian market, you pretty much should be spending less money. And also, you should consider the class of your game. Is it a AAA game, or is it an indie single A game? If it's not in between, if it's not those 2 ends of the spectrum, if it's in between, then it basically is a AA game. Now, in general, if you have a mobile game, I don't recommend you to launch it in Southeast Asia, because Garena's ROV, as well as Mobile Legends, Moonton's Mobile Legends, is pretty much killing it in Southeast Asia. The chance of success in Southeast Asia if you launch a mobile is pretty much close to 0. But if you have MMORPG, there are lots of MMORPGs launching in Southeast Asia this year. The marketing spend you should be spending is around $3 to $5 million in the first month across 6 countries. And of course, depending on the class of your game, you should be spending less. I don't recommend you to spend more than what is displayed here, because you probably won't make the money back. And the list goes on for card battle, for strategy, and battle royale. Next, how should you split your marketing mix? Okay, we have done like full-scale service for marketing for game companies like, say, NetEase, Nexon, etc. And really analyze in terms of like the CPI numbers, in terms of like the influencer costs in each country, the amount of views that you get from the influencer marketing, as well as out-of-home marketing like billboards, TVs, and train stations, trains, as well as TVC marketing. Now, this is what we generally recommend if you have a AAA MMORPG. So for digital marketing, which again, Madeviral, we don't do digital marketing, but in general, if you're looking at about 100,000 users per country in Southeast Asia, this is the amount that you should be spending, about $1.3 million. For influencer marketing, considering the cost of influencers in each country, this is the metric as seen here, and it's about $420,000 distributed across 6 countries. And for Out-of-home marketing, you should be spending about $1.4 million. Of course, Singapore has the most expensive kind of marketing, so you'll be spending a lot more, but this is the recommended amount. So generally, you'll be spending a minimum of $3 million across 6 countries. If you're spending less, you probably won't make that much. You're spending too much, you will start to lose money. So that's just a general recommendation here. Okay, PR. Now, in Southeast Asia, depending on the countries, certain game media are stronger and certain game medias are weaker. So in general, you should only be spending about $20,000. We recommend you be spending it on pre-registration phase, which is CBT phase, about $10,000 across 6 countries. And of course, at game launch, you should be basically spending about $10,000, so $20,000 or so. On top of that, what happens to the marketing after the first month? Now, if we're talking about MMORPGs, a lot of the companies from China and Korea actually overspend after the first month of marketing. Now, why would you do like big splash marketing? Because you want to establish a brand. When you have a strong brand power with your game, your CPIs are generally much lower, any kind of user acquisition efforts will be much lower, and also your monetization will be higher. Because if I trust the game, I will spend money. But the thing is, if you overspend after the first month, you basically are increasing more expense onto your P&L than, and not be able to make a reasonable profit. So in general, we recommend as a benchmark to spend about 20 to 30% of the revenue you generate in the first month back into marketing. Therefore, being able to sustain your user base and of course continue the lifespan of your game. For digital marketing, after the first month, we strongly recommend that you don't go crazy. Just spend enough to increase your DAU slowly every day. But once the CPI prices go too high, you really got to cut back on that. For influencer marketing, okay, here's the thing. When a game first launches, we don't recommend that you do any live streaming activities, because if your game has any bugs in it, it will be basically pretty public, and there's no way you can cover it up because it's live. So in the first month, focus on YouTuber videos, focus on video uploads, social media shoutouts to basically get users interested. Once you have a community of users, that's when you start doing live streaming to basically use influencers as a form of community management. After that, for OOH and TVC marketing, after the big splash marketing, the big branding, we only recommend that you do OOH and TVC during local holidays, special events, game anniversaries, as well as major game updates. And for final tips, basically, you gotta localize your game. If you don't localize your game, you won't make money. Nobody understands your game, and majority of Southeast Asian people don't understand English. So in Thailand, you gotta do Thai, Vietnamese, you gotta do Vietnam, you gotta do Vietnamese, Indonesia, you gotta do Bahasa Indonesia. And for Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines, you can get away with English. You don't have to do Bahasa Melayu, and you don't have to do Tagalog. They understand English, so it's okay. Moving ahead, for digital marketing, once the CPI prices get too crazy, you got to switch gears. So try influencer marketing, try out-of-home marketing, etc. And also, when you are planning your budget for marketing, you really got to consider the performance of your game outside of Southeast Asia first. Often, game companies launch the games in China, in Korea, in Japan, in the US first. Monitor your traffic, monitor your performance. If it's doing well, you have a good chance of launching in Southeast Asia. But if it doesn't do well in China or Korea, it probably won't do well in Southeast Asia either. On top of that, you got to consider the brand marketing as well, simply because, again, as I mentioned before, if you have strong branding, your general CPI prices can drop up to 5 times compared to your typical Facebook costs, simply because people are more willing to go download when they've seen an influencer make a video about it or seen a big ad about it, and also you'll be monetizing better. And if you have a AA or AAA game, don't spend too much money. You're not going to make money back. Lastly, very, very important and most important point, Southeast Asia is not like China, Japan, Korea, or the US. It really is quite different. We are a region. We are not a single country. There are multiple languages. There are different cultural perspectives, and you got to take that into consideration. So whatever works in other countries might not work well in Southeast Asia. So you have to take a local perspective when you're planning your marketing. And that's it. Yep. Thank you. Actually, can I go back a slide? Yep. this is really impossible. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Doesn't work. Yeah. Oh. Definitely not. In fact, we've actually seen many game launches in just English or just Chinese. So if you're doing only Chinese, you'll be targeting the Malaysian Chinese, which is the highest ARPU population in Malaysia. But if you're targeting English, the Chinese users can use it too, the Malay users can use it too. So localization in Malaysia hasn't made a very big impact on some of the publishers we work with.
Our next speaker is going to be talking about Malaysia, so you...
Okay. I mean, this is really just our feedback from our publishers, so different games, different results.
Do you guys have questions? Yes.
Hi. Some economic forecasts predict Indonesia will be the fifth most important country for economy in general.
Yes.
In the future, will it also reflect in gaming? Do you think?
So, I mean, any country that's a huge population has a huge potential for market growth. I mean, the previous speaker was just talking about the Indian market. So, Indonesia has by far the largest population in Southeast Asia with 270 million people. The only problem with Indonesia right now is that the users are so dispersed. You pretty much have like 1,000 or 2,000 islands in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia alone, right? But most of the monetization is still happening in Jakarta and the neighboring cities. And that means that pretty much if you're doing like splash marketing, you won't be hitting the right kind of users. In fact, we recommend very focused marketing in Jakarta and the greater Jakarta region. But eventually, what I'm trying to say is, the market will grow, and there's a good chance that Indonesia might take over as the number one highest grossing country in Southeast Asia because of the sheer number of people that they have.